Welcome to Modern Lifekeeping, where we discuss ways to thrive in today's world. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Connie McReynolds. She is a licensed psychologist and certified rehabilitation counselor with more than 30 years of experience in the field of rehabilitation counseling and psychology. Her new book, Solving the ADHD Riddle, The Real Cause and Lasting Solutions to Your Child's Struggle to Learn, is a #1 Amazon best-selling book in 8 categories. Dr. Connie, I have a lot of experience with children who have ADHD. It really touches me in a special way, and I'm fascinated with what you have to offer. Can you start out maybe by answering something that people might be wondering, which is your strategy and your solution effective for everyone?
Well, first of all, Lori, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be your guest today. And I'm always happy to answer that question, which is yes. So yes, the youngest person I've worked with and we're currently working with is 3, and the oldest person is 93.
Wow.
So everyone in between, because really it's about strengthening brain processes. So when we think about that, the formal name for that is neuroplasticity. And everyone has that. We all have it. We all possess it. We just may not harness it in the way that gives us the best advantage in our life. And that's really part of what my strategy is to help people harness those areas. We figure out what areas are a little bit weaker than we would like them to be. You know, what impact or effect is that having in a person's life? And then is there something we can do about it? Which in my clinics, the answer is yes.
Wow, that's very exciting. Now, so can anybody that's struggling with distraction or focus or attention come in and receive services from you to address that?
Absolutely. So the good news about this is it's all non-invasive. And by that, I mean, we're not applying, administering, injecting, or doing anything into the body. So neurofeedback is really known as EEG biofeedback. And for those who may not be familiar with that term, biofeedback is a term that a lot of people are familiar with. And so that's really where we learned that if we put a sensor on our finger, we could measure our pulse, and maybe we measured our respiration. And then through using some techniques, maybe we could slow both of those down. So that was called biological information, biological feedback, and then it got shortened to biofeedback. And neurofeedback is we just simply are measuring brain waves in the same way that we measure a heartbeat. It's just a sensor. So we're measuring that. It's fed into the equipment. And with that, we get nearly instantaneous feedback. Sometimes you'll see little bars going up and down. So a person can figure out, oh, am I paying attention or am I not paying attention? And through that exercise on a regular basis, and we find that we can strengthen those parts of the brain, and literally almost anyone can do this. So that's the beauty of it, is it's so affirming, life affirming, and self-empowering, because people figure out that they have more control over things than they thought they did. So many times when people have attention problems or a whole host of focus or listening or remembering problems, they feel powerless. And this really helps change that narrative to something that's a little different, to where people figure out, oh my gosh, I can actually do some of this and I can strengthen my brain.
I love that, because there's so many stories around attention deficit, and there's so many false beliefs, and there's so many myths, and then there's the whole medication. I worked for Child Protective for a long time. I had parents that would take their kids off the medication on Friday night and give it back to them on Monday. Just the stuff that people are doing in an attempt to not medicate their children, which I support, but still, when you take the medication, you have to commit to it, and it's a whole different process. So I love that this doesn't require any medication. Is it effective for everyone? Is there anyone that it doesn't work for?
Well, in the 15 years I've been doing this, and I always get that question. And what I will say is, if people are consistent, it's kind of like going to the gym. You can buy a gym membership, but if you don't go, you can say the gym wasn't very effective for you.
Okay.
So it's kind of the same way.
Reasons. Okay.
Yes. And so if a person really participates in a regular basis, and we've got the data, I mean, we use evidence-based data. So I'm not just going on, anecdotal. However, I find the anecdotal very important. So we assess at the front end. We're looking at 37 areas of auditory and visual processing. I look at some memory, some sequencing, and some conceptualization. And areas that are weak are the ones that get targeted. And then after 10 hours of training, pardon me, after 10 hours of training, then we come back and we rerun those assessments to measure for global progress toward goals. And so that's what makes it a little bit different, is that we have these measurements that help people actually see data, but it isn't just about the data. It's about, is this transferring into their daily life? Because I can have all the great data in the world, but if it hasn't made a difference in a person's life, then I don't consider that a success in our clinics. So we're looking for, how is this child doing in school? How's this adult doing in their life? Are we seeing improvements? Is there a lessening of the tension, the stress, the worry, the whatever it is that has caused the difficulties that have landed them in my clinics? And so we're looking for that as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that sometimes that even reveals where it doesn't look like they're progressing, but your tests show that they are. You can see maybe there's something else going on. Maybe it's a parenting issue, or there's something else going on. So I love that happens. So 10 weeks, does that imply that it takes about 10 weeks to start seeing some progress?
Well, everyone's different. So I will say sometimes we're seeing really rapid results, to where a parent will say, I don't know what's going on here, but we've only been coming for a couple of weeks, and it seems like I'm noticing some subtle differences. Other people, I had one mother, we'd done the whole series with her son, and she came in at the end of it, and she said, I really don't know that this worked. I'm not really seeing any difference in my son. And I said, oh my gosh. So we talked a little bit, and then she came back the next week and she said, okay, I'm here to stand corrected. It's like, what happened? And she said, well, I went to a family reunion this weekend.
That'll do it.
And she said, everyone wanted to know what had changed in my son, because he was so much easier to redirect than he had been before. And she said, I guess it was just so subtle that, over time, that I just hadn't noticed it. That's what she was saying. She hadn't really noticed it. And I think it does fall on a spectrum, where people can see changes. Sometimes adults will feel it within themselves within those first 10 hours. Sometimes it takes 20 hours. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit longer, depending on really the road that we need to travel with whatever it is that we found in the assessments. Trauma can take longer for us to really help retool the brain with that. Anxiety. And again, I'm not healing. I'm not, we're not talking in those terms. We're just looking at training the brain. And so how long does it take to train the brain to create some new habits? And we know, those of us who've had a few bad habits in our life, we know it sometimes can take a minute to be able to redirect that. And it can take a little bit of time. But the key is, are we making progress? How's the person feeling about it? And particularly in schools where we can see these behaviors start to diminish. When I did the pilot project in the elementary school, we really saw some changes start to happen after about 10 hours of those brain training exercises for these children. The principal was saying, I'm not seeing these kids in my office as much. The teacher is saying, we're not having as many meltdowns in the classroom. The parents are saying they're doing their homework, and so there you go. That's what we're looking for. Is that really translating out into life? Is it making a difference?
Oh, I love it. How empowering for these kids to know that, they are just like everybody else. They just need a little different of a tool.
That's right.
Now, I do wonder, I am an advocate of believing that there's a lot of superpowers that come with attention deficit. So I do wonder about if the children or the people lose those superpowers, or if you just have. So my understanding when I looked at your work was, it's almost like instead of having many pathways, they might have one clear path, which might be, for example, why they can super focus or hyper focus. So do they lose that clear path that they came with? You know what I mean? Or does it get stronger? Does it get weaker? How does that work?
Well, if we're swimming upstream, we might be really good with our upper body movements. We might be really good at swimming upstream, but if we could turn around and swim downstream, how much farther can we get and how much easier can we accomplish something? And so the way I look at it is, we're giving children and adults the ability to use all of the skill sets that they possess, and not just one or two that have surfaced literally as almost workarounds to these other struggles that they've had. And we can sometimes measure those workarounds. Those workarounds will show up at times on that initial assessment. And so in some cases, what's happened, these children have developed a strong stamina. But this stamina is through the roof because it is overcompensating for their ability to attend or focus or remember. And so they are exhausted. And so the children come in, they're tired, everyone's tired, this child wears out, even though they have amazing stamina. And so as I tell the parents with this, I say, yes, this is great. However, it's not so great. Because in this particular case, this little brain is just wearing itself out trying to keep up with what's coming all day long. And if we can bring these other areas up that are weaker, that over-functioning area is going to come back down a little bit toward normal. Doesn't mean you're going to lose your stamina. It just means you're going to gain everything else you didn't have. So we balance out the field to where they can actually, what I call is firing on all cylinders. You can have a speedy brain and a really strong stamina, which I see in children. So you've got a Ferrari up there, but you're running on third gear. You can't ever get into full gear with this to really show what you're capable of doing. And you always feel like you're lagging behind in so many situations where other people catch on to things quicker than you are.
Sure.
And that's really where the kind of self-esteem situation, I understand trying to find those assets and looking for superpowers with it. I get that. People need that sense of self and some strength in there for areas where they feel like they're not doing so well. So I get that. But what if we can give them everything that they already have and just get it all operating together?
I agree. Some of the superpowers I have identified working with kids are ability to hyperfocus, to be so focused on something you can't get their attention. Not saying it's good or bad, but it is, right? High energy, attentiveness to a lot of details that, and so I wonder if they lose some of those abilities, or it sounds like they might lessen them a little bit and be a little more calm.
Well, they're going to be calmer because you're not struggling so much. And so what we can't underestimate is the struggle that people go through when they're in grade school and they're watching their peers be able to do something and they can't figure out how to do it, because there's where the language starts. They start interpreting this in the wrong way. They start interpreting this as something about their intelligence. And this has nothing to do with their intelligence, but they have no other way to even talk about it. And then, we see bullying come along, and we see, all of these other things. Now, am I saying that my program's going to get rid of all that? No, I'm not saying that. But I am saying in situations where I've worked with people and we've had those kinds of conditions going on, when that child or the adult starts feeling better about themselves because they can catch on to things, then they're feeling better about themselves. And that's really what we want. We want that to come along. We want that self-empowerment. We want the improved self-confidence. We want the strengthened self-esteem, because those are the folks that have resilience then. You can have resilience in other ways, but if you're always feeling like you're pulled down, you're still struggling, you're still pushing against something, you're still trying to strive. And if we can channel that desire to do well into a brain that's capable of managing across all 37 of these areas, we've got someone who could really excel and not feel like they're being dragged down because they can't remember what they were just asked to do. And so if you can't remember, you can't remember. It doesn't matter how smart you are.
No, and it's frustrating. And really not remembering it doesn't mean that you're not smart at all. It just means you didn't store it for whatever reason. Yeah, well, that's fascinating. So are there other modalities that are similar to this?
Well, I've been in the field for 30 years. So I wish I knew back then what I know now, which is, when I was working with veterans of the VA, 25, 30 years ago, anger management, and just, I think back on all those veterans and just wonder how many of them actually had auditory and visual processing where their memory was literally affected, and the trauma that they had experienced and were enduring is just another layer on top of this other thing that no one knew anything about at that point. So, really kind of what can we do? What can we do to make things a little bit better for people? How do we kind of, that's why I appreciate being here, is being able to speak to people and kind of share that there's some other alternatives here. Talk therapy doesn't work so well sometimes for angry teenagers, and for people who've had trauma doesn't work so well for some folks. So for me, I see this as such an amazing process because it's so targeted and so focused. In my days when I first started my psychotherapy practice in another state, I think about some of the clients I would have on my caseload that would come every week for a year. Insurance back then covered everything. It didn't matter how long you needed to come, you just came. And I think back on some of those folks and I thought, gosh, wouldn't it have been interesting to know how well they can remember what it was I was asking them to do?
Yeah.
Because if you're giving interventions to someone and they can't remember,
if you're in survival mode or fight or flight or any type of off kilter, you can't remember stuff. Well, I love what you're doing, and I wonder. So, does insurance? Do you accept insurance?
I don't, because if it's outside the state of California, I'm not diagnosing. I'm just, we're just doing brain training. We're just improving focus and concentration. Inside the state of California, most insurance companies are not reimbursing for that. And the other piece of this, and I'll always tell people this, is that I do try to keep my price when I offer sliding scale fee for folks. And because we're not dealing with all of the paperwork and all of the stuff that goes on with that, I can keep the price points different than what some other organizations around do. So,
well, it sounds like it sounds like what I hear you saying is that while you focused on ADHD, that really the bigger picture, the more umbrella is processing, cognitive processing. So that really captures so many more people, right? So I love that.
Right.
I love that.
Okay. Yes, I really wrote the book once we figured out we could get a little bit of this outside, to other folks. Because I wasn't going to just put a book out there saying, oh, here's what's going on and good luck with that. And I thought there's enough of that out there in the world. I really wasn't going to write this until I felt confident that if someone called me up and we wanted to, try and help them, that we would have an avenue to do that. And we have that avenue. And again, it's not, I don't think encroaching on much of anyone else and what they're doing. It's just trying to help people for whom maybe these other services haven't really given them the resolution that they need. So
it's not what is going on is not working for, I would say, almost everybody. I hesitate to say that, but I truly believe that. And I love that. I can't tell if what you're doing is reprogramming, retraining, or offering tools, or is it a little bit of each?
Well, I think of it really because what we work with is just how the brain learns. And so the brain learns through repetition. But if you don't know what you need to train, that makes it a little hard to get focused and improve. You can say, well, I'm just not doing well in life. But then when we scratch the surface, we get to the stories, we do this assessment, which really is just looking at what areas are strong and what areas are weak, then we're able to target this in just strengthening that part. So if my memory isn't very good, then we have some memory exercises that we do. And so we helped, I've got a unit down in the retirement center now. So I've got senior citizens who, want to improve their memory or, remember things better.
When you first started speaking, I was thinking, would this work on people with dementia?
Well, what I will say is, again, I don't cure anything, but what I will say is if we find that there are auditory and visual processing problems, and about 8 or 9 out of every 10 person who walks in my door, regardless of age, we're finding this exists in them, and they often don't have the language to describe it. They're talking about their life, the areas that work, and the parts that don't work, and I can kind of listen to that and get some ideas. And then when we look at really how their brain is processing information, we can find that out. And so I used to be invited out before the pandemic occurred. I was out doing some training for senior citizens, and they kept saying, gosh, we really wish you would come into our retirement center and get this set up, because we think there are a lot of people who would like to make sure that their memory is working better. And so we do memory exercises with them. And, again, we can measure. So we can say, okay, here's your starting point. Here's where we want to get to. So how long it's going to take is unique to each person. So again, we just kind of keep it going and usually do 2 or 3 30-minute sessions a week and come back after the 10 hours of training and the 20 sessions and rerun those assessments. And then also check for life living skills, I guess you could call it, kind of how, what's the impact in the life and what are you seeing or noticing, if anything.
Sure.
And then, just kind of keep going with it. So really, again, it's back to that neuroplasticity. And we now know that all of us can continue to strengthen our brain throughout our entire life. It's not just that, oh, you hit a certain age and it's a downhill slide from here, like we used to think. Science has shown that is not to be true. That is just not true. That's an old myth and it no longer holds.
I don't think anything we have been taught. I don't think anything is what it seems at all. So I totally agree with you. Oh, and that's why they're always saying do crossword puzzles and do stuff to keep your mind going. And I agree with that. So I love what you're offering. I love that it's non-invasive. I love your experience. I love your approach. I think it's wonderful. How can we get more people to find out about this?
Well, thank you to you for having me here because that's part of the process. The other piece is certainly, on my website. We can tell people about my website so they can go there and they can direct people there. The book is up there. Solving the ADHD Riddle is on there. It's available on Amazon. My website is just my name. So Connie, CONNIE, McReynolds, McReynolds.com. And they can be on there. And I have information about the process and really how it works. It's non-invasive. I've published some in journals. And so I have some of those articles up there that people can read where we worked with veterans who have PTSD. We worked with children with ADHD. I published those in an international journal. And so, you can kind of see what the trajectory has been over time of really how this has evolved and just kind of figuring it out. So letting people know is the big thing. And that's really what the book is designed to do, is to start getting the conversation out there so we can literally change up this narrative from one of kind of feeling like you're disempowered to one of having some hope and being able to change things.
And doing so much more than helping people with ADHD. I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Connie, for coming on and sharing all your great experience and your insights and your knowledge with us. We truly appreciate it. And I will post all the information on how to reach you in the comment section.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It's been nice to be here.
Okay.